Since the last election in 2010, we've seen significant changes and many challenges in the education system and in children's services. The job of the Education Committee is to scrutinise the work of the Department for Education across both those areas. We hold education and children's ministers to account for their policies and decision making. We also look closely at the work done by the Schools Inspector at Ofsted and the Qualifications Regulator, Ofqual. To do that properly, over the past 5 years, we've held dozens of inquiries, looked into a wide range of issues, everything from school league tables to child protection systems. Through all of this work, we've asked whether the decisions being made by the government are delivering the changes required. In particular, closing the gap in attainment between children who are born to poor families and the rest, making sure that we've got an equitable and fair education system that works for all.
Well, closing the gap for social disadvantage in terms of educational achievement is really important. We're talking here about equality of opportunity, to be able to access good, stable jobs, influential jobs, and of course to play a civic role in society. Unfortunately, at the moment, children, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, are coming out of school really not with the educational skills to enable them to be able to progress with successful careers and to participate properly as citizens.
Early in the Parliament, we looked at the issue of young children and how ready they are for school. We returned to this topic recently to look at the DfE policy on admission of young children to school, particularly summer-born children, and how closely that policy is related to the latest research evidence. We also undertook a year-long inquiry in 2013 into children's centres and their future. We warned the government that it was no longer clear what these children's centres were intending to achieve, and that like many of the children that they serve, they were not achieving their full potential. We suggested that ministers needed to take a fresh look at children's centres and to act to protect nursery schools that provide the very best start for young children. When that advice went unheeded, we took the rare and very unusual step of recalling the minister so that she could explain to the committee what her department was doing to address our key recommendations.
Do you understand why you're here this morning?
Well, I'm delighted for any opportunity to speak to the Education Select Committee.
But do you know why you've been asked to come back on this particular inquiry?
The wellbeing and protection of children and young people formed a major part of our scrutiny work during this Parliament. One of the most significant inquiries we held was called Children First, where we examined 3 facets of the UK child protection system. Neglect, thresholds that trigger action to take a child into care, and how well the care system addresses the needs of older children.
Simple acts of kindness for a child in care are far and far between. They never happen. And in a society where all these stigmas and labels are put amongst them, we feel self-fulfilling prophecies of our attitudes towards them, so they feel very isolated and oppressed.
We recently looked at the support and accommodation options available to children in care once they're over the age of 16. Before all the revelations about Rotherham, Rochdale, Manchester, Oxford and beyond had come out, we questioned whether Ofsted was capable of inspecting the care system effectively alongside its work to drive up standards in schools. We concluded that Ofsted should be split into 2 separate inspectorates, something which the government didn't take up, but which we hope any Secretary of State after May will look at again. As you might expect, we spent a lot of time looking at issues affecting our schools. In particular, we looked at whether all the changes being put into effect by the government were really helping to improve school management, teaching, most importantly, educational outcomes and attainment. Teaching quality is the most important resource in our schools. We gathered evidence about what makes a good teacher, what keeps them in the profession, and how best to incentivise them so that the best teachers work where they're most needed and can add the most value. Whether we were looking at the Olympic legacy for school sport, the importance of sex education, or the value of collaboration between schools to make sure they're not isolated and they can share best practice between them, we would talk directly as often as we could to young people
as well as to their teachers and to school leaders, not only bringing them to London, but going out to meet them in their schools right across England. To help expand our direct engagement with young people, we also invited BBC Schools reporters to cover these events.
Hi, I'm Sana, and welcome to Barking Abbey School. The Education Select Committee is here today to investigate whether the Olympic legacy has lived up to its words.
Hi, I'm Bilal. The committee is here today to listen to the views and opinions of the students on the effects of the Olympic Games here at Barking Abbey.
And we made increasing use of social media to expand wider public participation in the work of the committee.
Thank you, Secretary of State. We're moving to a novel new section, quick fire question and answers, if I can ask you for, inspired by the Twitter feed, #AskGove, 5,000 plus. Wanting to interact with you.
We recognise that as elected politicians we don't have all the answers, and we wanted to make sure that everyone could join in the scrutiny of government policy for the betterment of all our young people. During several inquiries we looked in detail at proposals to reform exams for 15 to 19-year-olds. In 2013 we warned Michael Gove that his original schedule to abolish GCSEs would be imposing too much change too fast.
Last September, we outlined plans for changes to GCSE qualifications designed to address the grade inflation, dumbing down and loss of rigour in those examinations. We have consulted on those proposals and there is a consensus that the system needs to change. But one of the proposals that I put forward was a bridge too far.
He listened, and we now have a more gradual set of reforms, although still challenging for schools to cope with.
I think the committee was absolutely right to focus on school accountability in England. I mean, the effects of this system are huge. They affect large numbers of pupils across the country, and the detailed impact of that on pupils, which can be profound, is not always obvious or appreciated by the public. So the fact that it's being scrutinised in some detail is very much a good thing. One of the most perverse incentives of this system, I think, has been the focus on CD borderline pupils. The structure at the moment really does encourage schools to look at those at the middle of the ability profile and focus more resources on them, which I think has been, to the detriment potentially of many pupils at the top and bottom of the ability range. The committee's recommendation to move towards a broader measure of school accountability, which takes into account the progress of all pupils across the ability range rather than the focus on the CD borderline, is something that many close observers of this system would regard as a very positive step forward.
We also kept a very close eye on issues affecting our most disadvantaged children, not least those with special educational needs, and others consistently faring less well in the school system, including white working class children. The biggest single change we've seen over the last 5 years in education has been the rapid expansion of academies and the introduction of free schools. We ran a major inquiry in 2014 to look at whether this shift really has begun to raise standards for children in schools, and particularly the poorest.
Has the academy programme in this country sometimes gone too quickly and run ahead of quality and capacity?
Overall, with the whole of the academies programme, I'm tempted a bit like Chu En-lai when asked about, what he thought about the French Revolution, to say that it was too early to tell.
I think there are 25 sponsoring trusts effectively on a no-fly list. And to use another analogy, if you had 25 cars returned to the manufacturer, you'd probably want to look at the design of the model.
There have been mistakes. Some of the chains grew too quickly. I don't believe Whitehall should be overseeing 4,000 or however many schools centrally.
We concluded that the tension between the local authority and academy sectors is a healthy one. Schools are better than ever. Academies may be helping drive that improvement, but it's too early to come to final judgment.
Okay, now one of the most important areas that we've been looking at as an Education Select Committee is the whole question of the careers advice that young people are receiving. Well, Ofsted tell us that it is not always as good as it should be. And in fact, they tell us that 4 out of 5 schools are simply not providing the careers advice that the young people are entitled to. The responsibility for the provision of careers advice is transferred from local authorities to schools. So we, as an Education Select Committee, felt it was really important that we looked at just how successful that was. Another area that we've looked at is the whole area of apprenticeships and the development of apprenticeships, making sure that opportunities are available for young people, but it's only a real opportunity if the apprenticeship is of the right quality. Good careers advice, but then making sure that what is on offer is a real apprenticeship offering a quality training and a job to young people.
Our work ends when this Parliament is dissolved for the general election, but you can still help us shape the priorities of the next Education Committee. Tell us what you think the next government needs to do on early years, child protection, schools, Ofsted and support for young people. Join the conversation on Twitter.